I know I haven't made any videos on it yet, but at the moment, Invincible is easily my favorite running animated series. As someone who has genuinely been pretty tired of superhero stuff recently, this series is such a breath of fresh air. A world that's inspired by and pays homage to the comics that came before, while making a pointed effort to subvert expectations and more thoroughly explore the nuances of this kind of world, in both its world building and in its character relationships. And I think one of the reasons Invincible manages to feel so fresh, despite being so clearly inspired by other works, is because it's willing to really explore those gray areas. It's not a show where everything or everyone is clearly good or clearly bad. Good characters do bad things, bad characters do good things, and everyone has to reckon with the decisions that they make, regardless of their intentions or motivations. This is brilliantly illustrated in the majority of the characters in the series, but I think that there's no better illustration than in the dueling, inverted arcs of the title character Invincible and his father, Omni-Man. Hey, this video is brought to you by two things today. One is my official compilation channel, Johnny Too Cozy, where I'm re-editing tons of my old videos into themed compilations, long videos that are great for sleeping or drawing. And second, my wonderful patrons who get tons of extra content exclusive to Patreon. We're currently in the middle of season 2 of our BoJack Horseman audio commentaries. Check those out if they interest you. Today, I want to thank my top tier patron, Young Smokey VP $17. Thank you so much for your support. I couldn't do it without viewers like you. All right, back to Invincible. Just a heads up, there will obviously be major spoilers ahead for both seasons of Invincible, so if you haven't watched yet, you've been warned. Looking at Invincible at face value, it's pretty clear where the characters stand. Omni-Man is an evil authoritarian who represents a species that is hell-bent on taking over as much of the universe as possible. They believe that imposing their way of life by force is the only way to truly bring peace and equality. Invincible is a hopeful protector of Earth who cares deeply about his planet, his friends, and his family. He doesn't believe their free will should be infringed on, and he will protect their way of life with everything he's got. Omni-Man bad, Invincible good, right? So for simplicity's sake, let's imagine them on an axis. The right represents Omni-Man's authoritarian worldview. The left is Invincible's more nurturing and loving worldview. Nolan is on the right, Mark is on the left. Cut and dry, right? Kinda, but these sides represent both Nolan and Mark's idealized worldviews. In their minds, at least. This is where they want to sit on this axis. But the genius of the show is how it slowly starts to drag them both closer together, and how the show showcases both of their struggles to cope with this reality. I think many people consider Omni-Man to be a sort of evil Superman parallel, and to a degree, he definitely is meant to be. But the reality is that while Superman is from Krypton, he grew up on Earth. Omni-Man grew up on Viltrum and was indoctrinated into their culture and way of life. Omni-Man is more like Zod than Kal-El, whereas despite being half human, Invincible fits the Superman mold a bit more closely. Earth is his home. He grew up here. He is connected to the planet and its people and would do anything to protect it. But unlike Superman or Zod, Mark and Nolan are both much more subconsciously affected by the influence of the worldview that they oppose. Mark has spent his entire life looking up to Nolan, believing he represents peak righteousness, this selfless protector of humanity, everything that Mark aspires to be. The moment Mark gets his powers, he goes out and tries to do vigilante work to be like his father.
It's all I ever wanted for as long as I can remember. I want to do what you do. I want to be just like you.
However, over the course of the season, Nolan and Mark's training shows time and time again that Nolan and Mark have a fundamental disconnect. Nolan is a bit removed from humanity. He's out of sync with its people. We even see this in the opening scene of the show when he and the Guardians of the Globe protect the White House together. While they do all save the day, he is sort of this separate figure, helping but not working as a team with the Guardians. And then obviously, this is made very clear when he murders them all later, but you know, we were getting hints before this. In his training with Mark, Nolan is also focused on big picture stuff. He isn't connected to the people of Earth as much as he is fixated on stopping the bigger threats. Obviously representative of this Viltrumite worldview. They do not care about the individuals, they only care about the greater good. But we see this time and time again across the season. One of the most haunting moments is after Mark's devastation that the woman he saved, Maya, has died in the hospital.
No, they said she'd recover.
It's part of the job.
Or when Mark ditches Amber to stop a threat.
But I left Amber waiting in the room, so I gotta...
You left a girl in your room while you flew off to deal with a crisis. Mm-hmm. Good.
Or when Mark wants to help the team of a few astronauts sent to Mars to make sure they're safe.
Ugh. It's a waste of Mark's time.
Or when Nolan is adamantly against Mark helping Titan to take out Machine Head to free him and his family.
You'd be making a huge mistake. This is beneath you.
On one side, Mark is being trained and influenced by Nolan because Nolan wants him to help with their Viltrumite mission. He's subtly indoctrinating this greater good mentality into Mark. But on the other side, we see how Mark is influenced by humanity, mostly showcased through his connection with his mother Debbie and also his friend Adam Eve. In season 1, Mark's biggest fear is that he's too human to be enough like his father.
See, that's what I'm worried about. I'm nothing like Dad. I'm more like you.
In episode 2, when Nolan is in a coma, Mark sort of gets his hero support from Adam Eve rather than Nolan, and it's a much more nurturing type of emotional support.
Do you want to talk about yesterday? You look like you need to talk about yesterday.
Nolan generally just tells Mark exactly what he thinks he should do, also representative of his Viltrumite worldview, but Eve helps Mark work through his own feelings, and it's also clear that her point of view is more in line with Mark's natural inclinations, people-focused heroism. Mark is worried that he didn't do enough because of how his dad is such a big-picture hero, but Eve sees it differently.
Not bad for a rookie.
Are you kidding? I froze out there. People got hurt.
People escaped because of you.
Throughout the season, Mark is naturally drawn to the things that make him human, the things that connect him to his fellow people. His heroism alongside Eve fosters this, but so does the influence his mother has on him. Multiple times over the season, Debbie contradicts Nolan's advice, like when he doesn't want Mark to help the mission to Mars.
You need to decide what kind of hero you want to be.
Or when Nolan explicitly tells Mark not to help Titan with the Machine Head situation.
But I also know that helping someone is never beneath you.
Debbie gently nudges Mark in the direction that he feels he needs to take, not what is expected of him by Nolan. His draw to everyday human life is showcased in other ways as well. The big through line is his relationship with Amber. Though he desperately wants to be with her, his superhero duties constantly draw him away to the point where he's a pretty awful boyfriend. We even see that Mark's different approach to the same scenarios that Nolan has faced actually have more helpful outcomes. When he has to go fight Alan, something that Nolan has done multiple times, Mark's friendlier, more connective nature actually leads them to sit down and have a conversation, one that makes Alan realize he's been attacking the wrong planet for years and earning Mark a powerful ally. Mark's entire trajectory this season is that he is desperately trying to be like his father and do what his father expects of him, while more naturally connecting to these other parts of humanity that Nolan mostly rejects, which is why the finale is such a monumentally important turning point. The moment that Mark realizes that his father is not who he thought he was, that he doesn't have his or humanity's best interest at heart, he completely rejects him. Despite years of adoration, his entire view of his father is shattered, and he opts to protect his life and his people.
This is my home, and I won't let you destroy it.
Even if that means fighting Omni-Man, the most powerful man on Earth, his father. We'll dive more into how important this is when we get into Nolan as well. But the real genius of Mark's story so far is how season 2 completely subverts his trajectory in season 1. After the events of the season 1 finale, Mark spends season 2 doing literally everything he can to prove to the world and to himself that he is nothing like his father. He spends the entire first season trying to be just like his father, and the entire second season fearing that he's anything like his father.
I'm not my dad.
And everything that Mark prioritizes in season 2 are things that his father would not have wanted him to prioritize. Most notably are his relationship and his college work. Two things that arguably most represent a path for Mark to live a more typical human life. He is convinced that he can be a hero and truly be a part of humanity. But literally the day he gets to college with Amber, he's tasked with helping an alien species and ends up in space for months. And the moment he gets back from that, he has to go to space again for another mission. The first day out with Amber after that, he has to ditch her at Comic-Con for more hero work. And worst of all, in this time in his life where he is desperately fearing that he is too much like his father, he ends up acting a lot like his father in his personal relationships.
Because I'm doing exactly to her what my dad did to me and my mom.
In addition to this, he obviously misses months of college because of hero work and time in space, and he nearly flunks out.
You need to make a choice, Mark. If it's college, then commit to that. If it's not, then commit to something else.
This moment basically represents the last gasping breath from Mark's more normal human life. He decides he has to make this work, so he requests 2 days off a week from hero work, uninterrupted, so that he can be with Amber and have a real relationship with her. But this reveals the depressing reality that even setting this time aside for each other, they can't possibly have a normal relationship. Not when villains and Viltrumites are in Invincible's opposition.
Come with me now, or this woman dies.
The sad truth is she'll always be in terrible danger. They'll never get a moment of peace. It's not going to work, and Mark has to come to terms with that. And this is made even more devastating by his final showdown with Angstrom Levy, when Mark showcases the same rage and power that his father imposed on him at the end of season 1. Mark completely breaks down, realizing that despite trying desperately to be nothing like Nolan, he feels as though he has become exactly like Nolan.
I thought you were stronger.
Mark isn't saying this to Angstrom in this moment, he's saying it to himself. He thought he was strong enough not to let his rage overtake him, not to be like his father. Everything Mark tries to focus on over the course of season 2 is the antithesis of what Nolan would have wanted him to do. But by the end of the season, he has to reckon with the fact that he is simply not capable of living that life and being a hero. That ironically, if he wants to stop himself from becoming his father, he has to live his life more like his father. He has to give up his relationships and quit school.
I have to learn how to control myself. It's the most important thing I can do.
Though obviously Mark is moving more towards his father's place on that axis, it's also clear that he is still fundamentally very different from Nolan. And this is the most important thing that he will eventually have to come to understand about himself. But we'll dive into that after we talk about Nolan, who has nearly the exact same story this season, but in reverse. After Nolan flees Earth, something no Viltrumite has ever done before, we almost instantly see a change in him. The first thing we see him do after his depressed flight across space is save these helpless Thraxans from getting sucked into a black hole. This is the exact kind of personal hero work that Nolan didn't care about previously. This is not a big picture concern. This is a person helping out other people just to help them. When Mark arrives on Thraxa and confronts his father, he's not just baffled and confused by the changes he sees in them, he's hurt by them. Because suddenly, Nolan has a new family, one he seems to truly care about after telling Mark that he saw his mother as a pet. Nolan asks for Mark's help so that he could defend Thraxa from the inevitable onslaught of Viltrumites that are en route, something he never would have even considered for Earth. But Nolan seems to show real regret.
What I did on Earth was unforgivable.
While Nolan is feeling and acting on these new emotions, he is also deeply grappling with the reality of them. He has lived thousands of years under the indoctrination of Viltrum, and reconciling with these feelings is entirely overwhelming.
I'm not supposed to feel this way! How is this better?
Even after he's captured by the Viltrumites defending Thraxa, he struggles immensely with his new emotional state.
I'm not a Viltrumite anymore. Not really. I feel shame and regret for my actions.
But the reality is that these feelings aren't necessarily just this new worldview for Nolan. They are, but they were seemingly slowly bubbling up due to the time he spent on Earth. At the end of season 1, we see the memory that causes Nolan to flee Earth in the first place is one from Mark's childhood, at Mark's baseball game. Nolan is struggling to be present at first, but then we see seemingly the first moment where he disconnects from that bigger picture mentality. Debbie opens him up to what humanity is about, and he really connects with the people in his life on Earth.
Did you see? Oh, that was amazing!
Yeah, I saw.
But we actually do get other little hints of this shining through Nolan's Viltrumite facade across season 1. So much of his training with Mark is Nolan trying to reconcile his Viltrumite mission with the fact that deep down, he doesn't want to lose his family.
I can't help but think maybe our lives would be better if he hadn't gotten them at all.
Though he is this authoritarian manipulator, I think there are clear moments in which he is genuine in talking about his family life.
Yeah, your mom changed everything. She turned this place from a job to a home.
And those fears that we see so prevalent in season 2 were bubbling within him even back then.
I'm terrified I could lose everything.
Deep down, his connection with his family has changed Nolan, and I think it's what makes that final line in season 2 hit so hard.
I think I miss my wife
This is why Nolan refuses to kill Mark and tries so desperately to convince him to join him in the season 1 finale. He is reconciling with the fact that fulfilling his mission and keeping his family are not simultaneously possible. Does that sound familiar? Sort of exactly what we just laid out for Mark, huh? But the difference is that these two parallel paths are moving in opposite directions. They are coming from entirely different starting points, and I expect will at some point sort of meet in the middle. Because though Nolan is now struggling with his more righteous feelings and desires for connection, the truth is that the things that have made Mark act more like Nolan all stem from the things that make him fundamentally different than Nolan. We do see that sort of Viltrumite power bubble up and show itself a few times over the series within Mark, but those instances are always triggered when Mark is acting in defense of others. We first see it when he's fighting the Flaxans, when he goes Super Saiyan to save Eve. We see it on Thraxa when he's fighting Viltrumite soldiers, when he sees all of the Thraxans that they've slaughtered. And of course, though brutal, his fight with Angstrom Levy only goes down like that specifically because Angstrom threatened the lives of Mark's mom and brother. Mark might act like Nolan sometimes, but fundamentally, he is not Nolan. And that is what makes this crisis in season 2 so beautiful. It's what makes the way Invincible reconciles with these superhero concepts so much more impactful. They are deeply unpacking these kinds of scenarios, relationships, and insecurities in a nuanced way that isn't afraid to challenge the audience. They're willing to show Mark do something so brutal that he breaks down and questions his entire worldview. They're willing to show Nolan do something so righteous that you wonder whether or not redemption is a possibility for him, despite the unforgivable things he's done. But most importantly, they're willing to make the characters reconcile with these realities. They're willing to have Mark and Nolan inch closer together on this imaginary axis, forcing us to really question where it might be going, all while remaining hopeful in its messaging.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.